Hey, welcome to Info 3370, studying social inequality with data science at Cornell. I'd like to welcome you to the class. These videos will be a brief summary of what happens during class, and I'd love to welcome those of you in class to watch the videos, especially if you've had to miss for some reason, like if you're sick or for some other reason not in the room. But also anyone else out there in the world, you're welcome to watch and learn a little bit about what we've been doing in this class. This course will be unlike other courses that you have taken because it's going to cover a lot of material. So on one hand, this class is much like a statistics or computer science class, where we're going to learn a programming language, R, which we'll use to analyze quantitative data and produce visualizations. This class is also like a sociology or economics class in that we're going to engage with social science theories about inequality. How have incomes changed, and does it matter? We'll also engage with some philosophical arguments from political philosophy to think a bit about what kind of income distribution would be just and why we might prefer one income distribution or another income distribution. To get started, every table in class had a figure, and there were two figures. Some tables had the first figure and others had the second figure. These figures are taken from two papers, so Piketty and Saiz 2014, and a paper by the US Census Bureau in 2022. So let's start with the Piketty and Saiz figure. This figure focuses on upper tail income inequality. In particular, the authors have taken people and arranged them by incomes. And then they've considered those who make the top 10% of incomes. So these are the highest 10% of earners. And they've calculated what share of the total income in a place goes to that top 10% of earners out of the whole income that anyone gets. So in Europe, back in about 1900, it was roughly 45% of the total income went to the top 10% of people. In the US, it was somewhat similar. About 40% of total income went to the top 10% of earners. Then, over the first half of the 20th century, top share income inequality declined in both places until about 1950 or 1960. And then the two trends diverged. After that point, European income inequality rose only slightly, while US upper tail income inequality really skyrocketed. And there are big questions about why this happened. Why did the US see such huge increases in the income share that accrued to the top 10% of earners? Other tables had this figure. This comes from a US Census Bureau report about poverty in the United States. In the top panel, we see the number of people in poverty over the period from 1959 to 2021. This figure uses the official poverty measure, which has the longest time series, but it's also subject to some concerns. So there are those who think we should instead be using the supplemental poverty measure when studying poverty, and they have good reasons, and those are questions we'll get to as we go on through the course. For this figure, we're looking at the official poverty measure. What we see is that over this period, poverty actually fell quite a bit from 1959 into the early 1970s. We see this in the bottom panel. And one argument for why that might have happened is that this is the same period when the Johnson administration enacted the Great Society programs, which created social supports that lifted lots of people out of poverty. And then in the period after that, poverty has bumped up and it's bumped down, but it's stayed roughly around 11.6%, as it's noted at the far right of the figure. The reason for highlighting these two figures is that I think they tell very different stories about inequality. So in the left figure, we see how upper tail income inequality really skyrocketed at the end of the 20th century. And in the right figure, we see how poverty was like kind of flat with some ups and downs. And this happens because it really matters how you summarize inequality. There's a whole distribution of incomes, and you have to decide what aspects of that distribution matter. Do you care about what's going on with the top 10% of earners, or do you care about what percent of people are living in poverty? Your conclusions about how inequality may have changed over time might differ depending on the way that you choose to summarize that distribution. Through the semester, we're going to talk a lot about various summaries of inequality, and we're going to develop the tools to analyze data and produce visualizations like these. This course is possible because we have a great teaching team along for the ride. And so these TAs are going to help you figure out how to use R, and figure out how to connect data analysis to real social science theories about what's going on with inequality. Lastly, I'd like to direct you to the course webpage, which is publicly available on GitHub. And so if you follow this link, you'll go to the website. And on this website, you can see at the top our learning goals. Our learning goals are to visualize economic inequality with graphs that summarize survey data. Our second goal is to connect theories about inequality to quantitative empirical evidence. Our third goal is to evaluate the effects of hypothetical interventions to reduce inequality. And our final goal is to conduct data analysis using the R programming language. And as we go through the semester, you're going to want to return to this site a lot to see the organization of the course. So here in topics, you can see our general plan for the topics we're going to cover in this course, including income inequality, wealth inequality, things about opportunity, and also moral arguments. When you click on topics, you can get a calendar here of roughly the schedule at which we plan to cover those topics. And in the right column, you can see the readings that go along with the topics. So before the next class, you should read this Jenks 2002 paper, Does Inequality Matter? And we'll have a class discussion about that in our next meeting. At the top of the course website, you can see these important links. So the syllabus is here for everyone. And then Ed Discussion and Canvas are two password-protected sites for students who are enrolled in the course to ask questions that can be answered by peers and also by TAs, and Canvas where we're going to submit course assignments. So I'm going to stop there for today. I'm super excited for the semester so that we can all study social inequality with data science together. See you next time.